I want to cover some things that you will not find in the manual. These are things that I learned, sometimes banging my head against the wall, trying to figure things out. And this is common how you learn things. Trial and error is the best way to learn. But these are things that I think would save you a lot of time if I just tell them to you. So number one, we talked about call profiles. Remember, call profiles is information about the call as the call comes in. One of them is Annie. Annie is the caller ID of the calling party. There's also a call profile called call ID, which could sound like caller ID. It's a little bit different. And there's also one called calling. Who is calling? So while they're very similar, they're different. Now, admittedly, Annie and calling are the same thing. Who's calling? Show me the caller ID. But Annie is used differently when you're doing a database query. And I'm going to show that to you later. But these are one of the things that kind of segmenting out. In the center here, this call ID actually refers to the ID the system gave that call event. So if Sam Jones called at 12:05, there will be a system-generated call ID, but not the same thing. Now here's a new feature that was added in ECC 9 GA6. For the guys that are on the call that are technical and worked on the PBX side, there is something called a PBX DNIS map. This is usually where you map your DIDs with a logical name or an 800 number with a logical name. For those of you that might not know, if my 800 number was 1-800-555-1000, typically you'll see the number 1000 from the carrier. But in the phone system, you might want to show the full qualified 800 number. When you do that, the information that's configured on the PBX passes through to ECC as a call profile called DNIS name. I'm going to show that to you in a moment. That was a hidden gem that actually solves so many issues with reporting and gives you a little bit, actually a lot more control out of the system. Now there is a widget which is used for the callbacks. When you're using IVR to schedule callbacks, there is a widget that will collect the callback information. What is not specifically outlined about this is that if you want a callback in queue, you're going to use the same widget. You're just not going to fill out some information. So I want to point that out. There's also a widget called decision. Decision usually says yes or no. Is this yes or no? One of the things that I've seen users attempt to do is, well, my answer will always be yes, so just give me a yes condition. If it's yes, go here. But if you forget to configure the no condition, the system's going to say, well, I don't know what you want me to do. You've told me where to go when it's yes, but you haven't filled in the rest of the equation. So you need to fill out both sides, otherwise it'll always trigger false. Now when adding Odbc, this is connecting to a database. You must run it from the actual executable. You cannot use control panel. And you must right-click and run it as administrator upon initial setup. And I'll show that to you in a moment. And lastly, this is a fun one. You can actually use IVR to create alphanumeric readback. We had a customer who deals with automobile VIN IDs. And you know a VIN ID, if you have your registration, it could be XV17XP-LMNOZ, right? The system natively will not read back characters that are intermixed with numbers and alphabet, but you can do it. And I'll show you an example of that if we have enough time, but you can do things that are not really put in a manual. So those are some things that I've discovered that I can do. So let's talk about adding ODBC. When you want to add Odbc, if you're an admin on the call, most of the time you go to control panel. However, when you're adding it to ECC, you actually need to navigate to the executable, which is on the C drive, and I've highlighted it here in the rectangle on top. Go to the C drive, go to Windows, go to syswild64, look for the EXE, which is, I've marked on the right-hand side, odbcad32.exe. Right-click and run as administrator. That's kind of a hidden gem. If you don't run as administrator, you could add it, but sometimes it doesn't show up and it becomes a permissions issue getting to the database. So save yourself some time and heartache and just do it this way. Once it's added, you'll test your configuration, and lastly, you will restart only the contact center service. Now you can do that through control panel. All right, that's one of the hidden gems. Now here's another one. Going back to the DNIS map on the PBX. On the left, I've circled 3027. This is our 800 number. Typically, when the carrier sends that information to your PBX, you don't get the full 10 digits unless you ask for it, but you might get 3, 4, or 10 digits, or 7. In this case, the PBX sees those digits. On the right-hand side where it says dialed number, that can be alphanumeric. You can put the full 800 number. You can put, especially for marketing, you might put the 800 number dash a marketing code. Maybe it's mailer 27. Maybe it's mailer 82. So this lets you hand configure how you want it presented for ECC purposes. What this gives you is great control over reporting and visibility. So if you're a heavy analytics shop, I recommend you really take a look at this. Now, in IVR, we're going to get into this. You can see the rectangle in the center. I know it's small. Let's expand that. This is how that PBX name shows up as DNIS name. That was added in GA6. Funny story, it had been available in ECC for a long time, but it was never exposed, so we got it exposed. All right. Those were just a couple of pieces that I really felt were important to show. Let's get into a live demo.